Hey, what's up? As you can see, I got my CZ-5000 synthesizer with me today, and when I got it recently I was very interested about the sequencer it has inside. On this sequencer, opinions really go in all directions. Some say it's the worst sequencer ever, you cannot use it. Some say it's the best arpeggiator. So what is it like? Let's find out today on Synths and Sounds. Before we have a look at the actual synthesizer, let's have a look at the history of Casio's synthesizers. Aside of calculators and watches, Casio is mostly known for producing cheap plastic keyboards. Since keyboards and digital synthesizers share a lot of their chips and circuits, it was just the next step to make these keyboards programmable. A first attempt was the 1979 VL1 music calculator, which was a very cheap and primitive programmable synthesizer, which even had an integrated drum machine. Being the first commercially available digital synthesizer, it was quite a success and made its way even into popular music. At the same time, Casio did quite some research and development in which Japanese pioneer synthesist Isao Tomita was quite involved. After the success of Yamaha's DX7 in 1983, Casio also took the final step into the synthesizer market. Again, it was the lower price which made people get Casio's CZ-101 instead of a more pricey Yamaha DX7. At an initial price of below $500, it sold an impressive 68,000 units. Aside of the price, there were many other differences to Yamaha's DX series. Most importantly, Casio was not using Yamaha's FM synthesis, but the self-developed phase distortion synthesis, an interesting concept which wasn't reproduced by any other company. Even though the following models of the CZ series became more and more advanced, they could not follow their initial success. They stopped making professional synths in the early 90s and went back to just making cheap plastic keyboards. The CZ-5000 was the only one of the series that had a built-in multi-track sequencer. I did some research and found out that it was probably the first commercially available synthesizer that had a multi-track sequencer at all. The guys from Syntaur mentioned that the Ensoniq ESQ1 was the first synthesizer to have a multi-track recording when it came out in May 1986. But as you can see in the Japanese Wikipedia, the Casio CZ-5000 had been around for an entire year at that time. Alright, let's have a look at the sequencer in real life. So you can see this area is all the controls you have for the sequencer. So there's quite a lot of things going on. Most importantly, you have the 8 tracks, and here you have the recording area where you can already see that you have 2 different modes. Having a look at the real-time mode first, I can choose real-time mode and then choose a track to record on. I can push the record button. I'm getting some metronome. I can do some recording, and then once I reset it again, I have now something recorded on track 8 and I can play it back. Yeah, sorry, I really didn't think of any pattern right there. The real-time mode works okay, but once you want to repeat a real-time pattern, you have this repeat button, but it often gives you 4 steps of break in between starting the real-time replay again, so you have this weird moments where there is no music. So on that point they really didn't do it perfectly. It was a very early stage of sequences and it's not really of a big use. But once you look at the manual mode, things get much more interesting. So again, I can choose my track, and again I have these buttons which now are there to insert values for the notes. Which means that it's not a step sequencer, but it's in fact a note sequencer, so you can program it note by note. Also, using this button you can make it into a repeat mode and actually give it an infinite repeat. So in this way, by programming it note by note, you can really get whatever line you like. You can just program it and then it will play it back perfectly to the tempo you want to use. This is what manual mode looks on the display. It first wants you to select the programmer. So that's what we are going to do. We push a button to choose our program. We can see it has chosen our sound from bank number A1. You can choose how much portamento and glide you want. We don't want any. And then we are in this empty space where we can now start with adding an infinite loop. So now we have this loop. We can say, let's make something basic using just quarter notes. We are now in quarter note mode and can insert the single notes. Something like... So we have now entered 8 steps for the notes, which we can now play back. So pushing the reset button to get everything to the starting point, I can now just push the play button. And it will play back whatever we just recorded. And now comes the really amazing part about this multi-track sequencer. So you can record 8 different melodies or just patterns, whatever you like. Now the synthesizer all in all has 8 voice polyphony, which means that on each of the 8 notes, being a digital synthesizer, you can actually load another program, which makes it 8 voices monophonic with 8 different programs. So out of this you can really get out a lot of sounds. So in my opinion, working together with this CASIO synthesizer, the sequencer, is just perfect. You can use so many things. So you really have all the possibilities to use just this sequencer to make entire tracks. Combining this with the great ability in creating drum and percussion sounds on the CZ-5000, you can really compose an entire 8-track song on just this synthesizer. So that's what I'm gonna do next. So I'm using 7 tracks for my sequences, and on the 8th track I won't record anything, so I have still a monophonic synthesizer that I can play on while playing back the 7 sequences. Once you have 8 sequences, you won't be able to play the keyboard since there is no polyphony left.